After I passed out in X-ray, I was put into an empty semi-private room. It was around 10 at night. As they got me into bed, I remember how shockingly cold the hospital floor was. It was early summer and I had worn flip-flops to the hospital, so my feet were bare, and I could not believe how cold the floor was in the hospital room. I also noticed how filthy my feet were. It has stayed with me ever since. I was alone in my hospital bed. It was very dark with the lights out and everything quiet for the night. I was having trouble falling asleep. I was tossing and turning. My hand was bandaged. I had an going of antibiotics, and I felt like I was going to pass out again, like I had in X-ray. So, I decided to fight the sensation because I didn't like it. I knew I couldn't fall down again, but just that spinning, dizzy feeling was too comfortable. I rolled onto my left side and I grabbed the bed rail. The sensation passed and I thought I had recovered from swooning. I rolled onto my back, and that's when I realized I was no longer in my body. My first sensation was very strange. I couldn't feel my body at all, but I knew I was not paralyzed. I sat up and felt a sensation of passing through a warm wall of gel. I don't know how to describe it. Like thick warm shampoo. It wasn't a dry and it wasn't liquid. It was like both at the same time. There was no pain, and then I swung my legs off the bed and stood up. It was then that I noticed the hospital floor wasn't cold anymore. I couldn't feel the temperature of the floor at all. I could see my body on the bed, but I wasn't afraid of it, or freaked out from being outside of it. It was the same sensation you have when you get out of your car. It's there, it's parked, and you don't think about it anymore. I didn't worry about it at all. It wasn't scary, and I never worried about it. At the point the room started to expand. It got bigger, and it changed. The curtain that once hung from the ceiling of my hospital room was not on a rack to my left side and just ahead of me. It was like a time warp had occurred. Suddenly there was a bright yellow long machine against the far wall, and the window in the wall had gotten bigger too. It was like a scene from a film in the 1940s, and nothing about that registered with me at the time. It was just all accepted like this was normal. Nothing I saw was ever alarming or frightening. Now, I was alone in my hospital room, but suddenly there was a man before me. His back was turned to me, and he was also had a hospital gown. Thankfully, I could not see the back of it lol. He seemed older, around late 60s, and I didn't know him. I never questioned why he was in my room. Then, everything went pitch black. The darkest dark ever. I remember never having fear I was suddenly struck blind. I just accepted that everything went dark. I remember putting my hand before my face to see if I could see my hand. And I couldn't. I knew I was still standing up, and I knew I had not traveled out of my hospital room. I had not taken a single step from the side of the bed. But everything was just pitch black. Room is the wrong word. It's an area. I could tell it was immense and close at the same time. It was completely silent. There was no noise, and nothing was in there with me. I sensed nothing with me. It had all the fanfare of waiting for the school bus, or me mom to come pick me up. It wasn't scary and I wasn't worried. I had a thought to school kids on the playground who used to torment me for not being baptized, and telling me I was going to be thrown into a lake of fire for not being baptized like them. I thought, God, and that's when the door appeared. In the dark, a door slightly ajar came open. It was about 500 feet from me. And the instant I thought of going to the door, and instantly, I was at that door. As I put my hand to the doorknob, I felt like I was walking into the house where I lived. I had not questioned about why the door was there. It was comfortable and welcoming, and I was home. As I opened the door, the room was solid white. The first thing I noticed was the seam where the floor met the wall, and it just wasn't there. I thought that was very odd. I followed with my eyes, seemingly going to the corner, but there was no sharp edge or corner. And then I started looking up the wall, looking for the seam where the walls meet, but there was one either. It was very bizarre to me young mind. I had never seen anything like that, and as I raised my head to look up the wall, I saw the ceiling of heaven. It was blue sky, as expansive and beautiful as the sky over our heads, but somehow brighter and more vivid. I've never seen a sky like that before or since. It was huge, massive. We don't have words big enough to describe this. It was as big as the sky over your own head now. It was huge. There were bright fluffy clouds and some birds, and as I noticed the edge of it, I noticed it was surrounded by crown molding. As my eyes followed the beauty of the scrolling, I saw it was supported by a massive beam that had a carousel carving to it, like the pole that goes through the horse you ride on. Again, no fear, no question of where I was, and I just accepted everything I was seeing and experiencing. I had no clue I was in heaven. At this point is when the male angel showed up. Everything from this point on is telepathic communication. They never spoke in the way we do. This was all in the mind. Every word and nuance, every gesture and feeling I was very aware of. He didn't poof into the room. He did not walk in. He did not fly in. He didn't even have any wings. He was dressed like someone from a neighborhood. He was very handsome. He reminded me of a boy I liked at me school. He was tall and blond and rugged-looking. He had on a red flannel shirt, and I could see the white undershirt peeking out from beneath, and he had on 501 Levi's jeans and black Converse high-top sneakers. Of course, this struck me as very odd because at the time everyone was wearing white Reebok high tops, and I thought his fashion choice was way off. At this he smirked and said, "Do you want to stay? Or do you want to go?" And instantly I felt I had all the time in the world to make me choice. Instantly I thought of my mother. During the time that I was thinking of my mom, I saw her in the living room of our home, on the phone getting word from my dad that I was coding and they were doing all they could. I had been found dead in my bed by my dad. I could feel my mother's fear and hurt that she could lose him. It made me concerned she would be upset if I stayed in heaven. Would I miss my mother too much if I stayed? And would I get in trouble with her if I stayed in heaven? As I rolled that thought around in my mind, a female angel showed up. She was blonde and smaller than, and dressed in a yellow dress. She also had no wings. I didn't immediately realize I was talking to what I call angels. Then she said, "You don't have to worry about that. Your relationship with your mother will change later on," and instantly I had no more concerns about what me mother thought of or felt about me choice, and the scene of her on the phone with my dad ended. At this point I still had no idea where I was, who I was talking to, or what was going on. I didn't feel confused either. Everything was just accepted like it was the most normal thing in the world. And I was deciding to stay in this place with these people or go back to my life on Earth. At this point, a really odd thing started to happen. I had the sensation of being two people at once. Not that my soul was torn in two or anything. Just that there was another me at the same time. The other me was older, wiser, and knew stuff that I didn't. I call it flight control, because it's like they are the control tower. It's hard to explain. The me making the decision to stay or go, and the part of me that was already there. I knew that part was long-term and never left this place. It's hard to describe or explain. As the angel, who very much didn't want me to return to Earth, railed against me going back, the other half of me countered with reasons to go back to Earth. I still have to have me son, I thought, and I instantly knew that having me son was part of my life purpose. A goal for living was to be his mother and raise him. Nothing about who his dad would be or anything like that, just that I had to have me son and raise him. I put a pin in that. And then the angel said, "Your life will always be a struggle." Now I had no idea what that meant. I'm only 17, without a brain in my head, and my first thought question was for food, shelter, and there was no answer. But I knew the struggle had nothing to do with money, or food, or anything material like that. It was something else, and it was going to happen soon. And then the angel said to me, "There are choices you can make that can cost you your soul." And again, I had no clue what that meant. As I stood there confused, the angel showed me war. In this video, I was on Earth and older. I was much older my age now, and I was running with a group of people, being led by a soldier. But I couldn't place the uniform he had on. It was khaki color, and our guys in the military in the United States wore green fatigues. So that made no sense. I saw the guy had a rifle, and we were all running for safety. I could see the smoke and hear the bullets being fired, and I could see the sandbags and the block walls we were running for. And the soldier had on a square backpack, which reminded me of the soldiers of World War I, but it was very square, not rounded at the corners, so it was confusing. Then the scene ended. This female angel who showed me all this was being stopped by someone you could not see or hear. They were having a conversation, and I knew it had something to do with me free will if she showed me any more. The person who arrived never showed themselves, and there was no recrimination, or judgment, or admonishment. The woman I was talking to now stood before a very long sheet on a clothesline. About 80 people were behind her a short distance off, and I could not see them clearly, but I knew they were there to welcome. And I could feel from this woman a grandmotherly, aunt sort of feeling, very caring, and that we had known each other for eons, not just years or decades, but eons before the world was formed, and she had me best interest at heart. Then the other part of the woman I mentioned before spoke up and said, "I have a lot of work to do," and me first thought was digging ditches. Then I agreed that I did have a lot of work to do on Earth, even though I had no clue what that work was. And then I had a falling sensation, and I was slammed with great force into me body in my hospital bed. My father had hold of me foot with a great look of concern and fear on his face. A look I would not wish on any parent, a look I had never seen before or since, and my dad was a World War or a Pearl Harbor survivor. The nurse said, "Welcome back." She looked at my dad and then to me and said, "He'll be okay," and began to peel the stickers off of me. I have remembered this event all these years. The rage he felt toward me sister that caused us to fight all the time was gone. We never fought again. I never told my father about me Andy. I didn't think he would believe me. He died in 1997. I never told me Frank, who was murdered in cold blood 5 months after our engagement in 1990, because he was devout, and I didn't think he would believe me. I know now that was the struggle the angel was trying to tell me about. The struggle of heartbreak. The choices we can make that can cost me soul. Suicide. I did have me son in 1998 at age 34. My son is 23 now and he's an empt. And I told both of my kids about me. The other things have come true from me. My relationship to me mother did change. We no longer speak. She's very lost and in the care of me sister. I told my mother about me when I was 40 years old. She told me the work I had to do was spiritual. As for war, that remains to be seen. But I no idea in that. I saw no more of my life after showing me that war scene. I think I get shot, but time will tell.